Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the American Masterminds Podcast.
Each episode, we invite extraordinary guests who are masters of their craft. They're innovators, entrepreneurs, and of course, motorcycle enthusiasts who have made their mark in the world.
They share their stories, insights, and hard-earned wisdom, giving you a front row seat to the strategies and experiences that shape their successes.
So sit back, grab a drink, and get ready for an exhilarating ride as we dive deep into the minds of these exceptional individuals.
Along the way, we'll uncover powerful strategies, gain fresh perspectives, and explore the limitless possibilities of what it takes to be an American mastermind. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the American Masterminds Podcast. I am joined tonight by my co-host, Mr. Rob Adams.
How you doing?
We have up on the soundboard, we got Alec Langdon. And Jared Bayless, of course, stopped in to join us tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Steve Spencer. Now, Steve is a criminal defense attorney here in Salt Lake, and he's here to drop some wisdom on us, boys. We'll see if we can... also, this is maybe the guy that represents us when we get in trouble. Alec, I'm looking at you, you know.
Gotta get you on retainer sooner than later.
What?
I had Steve on retainer the third day I met him. Walked in, gave him $1, and said, and we're good, right?
Yeah.
Good call.
So, Steve, here's the breaking news of the day. We got Donald Trump that went in for a mugshot. You guys all hear this?
I did not.
I bet you by the time this podcast is done, Alec will be able to find it because they're saying it's going to be the most famous picture ever. Right now, the current longest standing picture, the most famous picture in the world is one of Elvis. And I think it's the black and white one where he's talking into or singing in the mic, you know? And they're saying because this particular picture is it's a mugshot, so it's public record, so nobody owns it. So anybody can go in, take it, like you're going to see this thing on T-shirts and everywhere. You get free use. So big special day, good day to have an attorney on. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you.
So Steve, I know one of the first topics that you kind of wanted to get down, and we've got a bunch of guys here that are gun nuts, all right, all four of us here. So why don't you walk us through some of the lesser-known gun laws that pertain to carrying, because that's a big question.
All right, very well. Well, there has been a relatively new development in Utah law in February of 2021, so about 2.5 years ago. Governor Cox signed into law House Bill 60, which is what is commonly known as constitutional carry. So most people who have any familiarity with guns and gun owner issues are familiar with the concealed carry permit, which is issued by the Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Criminal Identification. And they still issue concealed carry permits. However, at the present time and since February of 2021, it is lawful to carry a concealed handgun on your person or in your vehicle so long as you are not a restricted person. Brief examples of restricted persons, people with a felony conviction, people with misdemeanor or felony domestic violence conviction, people who are habitual users of illegal narcotics. Hunter Biden, sorry.
Can't carry.
Yeah.
Here in Utah.
And if you throw it in a dumpster out back, that's still illegal too.
He can get away with it.
But if you're not a restricted person, you can legally carry a concealed, under the constitutional carry theory, you can carry a loaded firearm on your person or in your vehicle. Now, having said that, it's important to also note there are some areas in the state of Utah, such as school grounds, such as national parks, where it is not legal to carry in that manner. And so, for example, if you're driving in your car, you have a loaded handgun with you. If you drive onto school grounds and you exit your vehicle, you may have a problem. So people should be aware of that. But constitutional carry, of course, is a victory for law-abiding gun owners, I think.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I remember that I was a police officer for about 8 years, and there was a certain level of readiness that the gun could be in back then, this is a minute ago, is that still the case? Like there has to be 2 motions before you can, if you carry the gun on constitutional law, can it be a chambered bullet? Can you have, like, what level of readiness can you have the weapon?
Yeah, that's a great question. Under the constitutional carry theory, the gun can be loaded, which the legal definition is that it has a round in the firing position.
Wow.
Okay. Now, something to note. Okay, it's not requirement to constitutional carry, as we said, to have the concealed carry permit. However, if you're going to carry a long gun in a vehicle and also have the long gun be loaded, namely having a round in the firing position, and that's also true of muzzleloaders. If the muzzleloader is charged muzzleloading rifle, then it is unlawful to do that unless you have the concealed carry permit.
Okay.
So,
really?
loaded handgun in a vehicle or on your in a vehicle under constitutional carry theory, but a long gun, it would be necessary to have the concealed carry permit, to have the long gun in the vehicle, and also have a round in the firing position. Now, if there is 2 mechanical movements, okay, such as pulling the hammer back on a revolver, okay, and then pulling the trigger in order to get it fired, or in order to have it fire, that is not considered to be loaded. So you need 2 mechanical movements, okay, in order to get the gun to fire, in order for the gun to be
Defined as loaded.
defined as unloaded legally.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
And the same is true for open carry. Well, we're on the topic. So 3 categories, basic categories of carrying we're talking about. We talk about the constitutional carry, the open carry. Okay, open carry is also legal in the state of Utah. It is what it sounds like. You are carrying a firearm, and it's observable to other parties. Open carry is legal in the state of Utah, but it cannot be loaded in the sense that there is a round in the firing position. As we said, 2 mechanical movements in order to get the gun to fire. And I can only imagine, I'd have to speculate somewhat without going back and reading all the transcripts of the Utah Senate, what the rationale was that for. But it seems to me that the reason would be law enforcement comes, they see a person carrying a gun on the street. If that person has a nefarious purpose, it would only make sense that that gun is loaded. Okay, a person who's simply carrying it for protection, 2 mechanical movements, take them a second. I can imagine that's for the benefit of law enforcement, or so it seems to me.
I like how laws can be applied to people who don't abide the law. Like, you know what I mean? That is to protect. I think you're right. I absolutely agree. But if someone has a nefarious mindset, they don't really care what the 2 mechanical movements are, do they?
That's right. That's right. Well, and that's a debate that will go on forever. Is the solution to problems with guns a good guy with a gun? And we won't try to unpack that today, I imagine.
Yeah.
Do the rules for people that do have a concealed carry, do those still apply, like for those restricted areas?
Yes. So the concealed carry, okay. So the advantage of still having the permit, although it's not necessary to have it anymore under the constitutional carry theory, one advantage is you can carry the loaded long gun in your vehicle, okay, with a round in the firing position if you have the concealed carry. Another advantage of having the concealed carry, if you travel and you want to carry in your travel, I believe there are 38 states that have reciprocity with the state of Utah for the concealed carry. So my advice to anyone who's doing that is make certain that you check the gun laws in the state where you'll be. Make sure that
Don't go to those other 20 states.
make sure that not only is this the state you're going to has a reciprocity arrangement with the state of Utah or whatever state it is that issued your concealed carry permit, but check and see if there are other restrictions that are not identical to the restrictions in the state of Utah. Familiarize yourself with concealed carry laws of the state where you'll be. It's common sense.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to these kind of things, and when the bad situations happen, that's usually what's missing is common sense.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have common sense if you have a gun. That's my opinion.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And keep your drugs in a different room.
Yeah. Which raises another very interesting point. Okay, as a category of restricted persons we didn't talk about, and it is well. Let me unpack this a little bit. Rewind a little bit. Second Amendment. Okay, there is not Second Amendment protection for anyone who's in the process of committing a crime. Okay, which would include, of course, carrying illegal narcotics on your person. If you have illegal narcotics on your person and you also have a gun on your person, it could be the narcotics that you have. Now I think a small amount of methamphetamine in the state of Utah is now a Class A misdemeanor. The legislature made that change, years ago, so that people whose only problem with the law is their drug habit, that they don't have the felony conviction, will help them get employed. I think that was the purpose of making that change in the law. But if you have methamphetamine or any other contraband narcotic and a firearm, it's a felony. Okay, and people should be aware of that. One way to get in a lot of trouble really fast is to either be intoxicated or be in possession of intoxicating substances and also have a gun. One way that frequently happens, people on the deer hunt, sitting around the campfire, having a few shots of whiskey, having a few beers. Game warden comes to check permits, to check tags, and notices that people are drinking, that they seem to be impaired, and they also have their guns. They're going to get a ticket, and they might lose their guns. They might lose their hunting privileges, at least for a time. So people should be aware of that. If you're going to have a drink on the hunt, I suppose if you're having it before bed around the campfire and you're going to be able to sleep it off plenty well, that's not a problem. But my advice would be put the gun in the car, put it in the case, lock the car,
Lock the case.
Put the bullets away separately, and then I can't imagine that there would be a problem if you're having a few drinks around the campfire. But of course, my unsolicited advice, which I realize people don't want even from me, would be that, if you're on a hunting trip, it would be really poor judgment to consume alcohol to the point that there would be a problem, say if you would get a DUI if you were to get in a vehicle, something like that. That's just poor judgment.
I've often thought about after being an officer for 8 years, I've thought about being a game warden and rolling up on a campsite full of buddies who have been drinking, who are armed. Like, that's terrifying. There's a lot of other things. I would rather pull over a low rider in West Valley than roll up to a campsite full of drunk hunters. Yeah. That would be I don't know if I would. Just have a good night, fellas.
You don't hear a lot about that.
You really don't, but I can see how it could be a problem as per the law goes. But
that's something I've never thought about either.
It'd be a terrifying job.
Yeah.
That's not where I'd want to be, because you're wrong no matter what.
Yep.
Yeah.
And usually the people that are out hunting, they know how to use the guns that they have.
Most of the time.
and
Pretty well.
how to aim them and everything like that. But they're also, that's usually a testosterone outlet is the
especially
hunt.
with your all your buddies
And you're drunk.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
testosterone
terrifying.
flowing.
Yeah. Yikes. Interesting stuff. So as these laws have changed, have you in your profession seen the change in the face of the crimes that you're looking at? Are these things that you have to weigh regularly? As I had the gun, it was 2 mechanical movements away, or does it really weigh in very much to your business?
Another good question. I have not had any cases, and I do hundreds of cases a year. I've not had a case where people have been charged with a violation of the open carry law or the constitutional carry law. I've not seen that yet. It doesn't mean that it's coming. But on that topic, what I do see, common problems that gun owners have that get them in trouble generally and jeopardize their gun rights. One is what is known in the Utah State Code as colloquially as brandishing a firearm. So in other words, the question is, okay, if you simply have a firearm and someone else is able to observe the firearm, they can see you have the firearm. Is there a possibility that the circumstances may create a problem for the person possessing the firearm. Something that often happens in the midst of a road rage incident or other type of an incident, one driver who happens to have a gun with them will show the gun to a person that they're having an argument with. Perhaps the subjective intent is to warn the other person that they don't want to pursue a physical altercation because their partner in the argument is armed. But what the law does, the prosecutors at least, they construe that as presenting the gun in a threatening manner. So brandishing is a Class A misdemeanor under Utah law. It's a fairly serious crime. Misdemeanors in Utah are A, B, and C in that order. It can even result in a jail sentence of up to 364 days. But it's a common thing that people who are just in a heated argument will make the other person aware that they're armed by presenting the gun. And the theory under which that's prosecuted is that simply presenting it under those circumstances is an implied threat. And many people who are otherwise, I think, law-abiding and decent people make that mistake.
Yeah.
On the force continuum, they teach you in the police academy. That's the one step before death.
Action.
If you show someone the gun, that's when I was in the business, that's what they would consider that, as like you are giving them a lethal threat. It's
Right.
not just like, hey, back off.
Yeah.
I know I've definitely thought about doing this
Yeah.
a couple times in my life. I'm like, man,
That one
This
guy on the
guy's
highway
such a-
that cut Roger off? Yeah,
prime
he almost got
example.
from everybody.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say, boys, I think in my experience with law enforcement, if you take your gun out, you're killing somebody.
Yes.
Right.
Period. There's no other reason to take your gun out.
And
And,
that's-
when you take the gun out, the intention is not to even wound them.
Right.
No, it's overtime.
It's go time, and so that is the thing that I really liked. I've taken the concealed course a few times, and that's the one thing that I really appreciated about it, is they reiterate that over and over again. This isn't show and tell. This
Right.
is, I'm taking this out to protect my life. Period.
Interesting point that you raised, that even for police officers, okay, they don't take their gun out randomly, haphazardly. Okay, it's a very intentional thing, and it has to be done correctly.
On the force continuum.
Yes, and I think I just want to clarify, to be charged and even convicted with the crime of brandishing, it's not necessary to point the weapon. It's not necessary that the weapon be loaded. It's not even necessary that it be a real gun. If it's a facsimile of a gun, if it would appear to the other party that this may in fact be a real gun, the fact that it's a BB gun or even less of a gun, a stage facsimile or something like that, the elements of brandishing are still met.
Wow, lethal threat.
Well, it's even like the gangster move, right? You can just pull your shirt up like that.
Yes.
That's brandishing, right?
That would be brandishing because you've displayed the firearm in a threatening manner. Now, ultimately, that question would be up to a jury. If a person, defended themselves and they proceeded all the way to trial, the jury would answer that question. But the jury would get written instructions about what the crime is. So the possibility of the jury looking at those circumstances and saying, "Yeah, no, I'm not concerned," it's not like that. Okay, but a lot of people don't understand that when people are impaneled on a jury, they get many written instructions instructing them what the law is, and they're expected to follow the instructions. They can determine the facts as they believe them to be, but they must follow the instructions that they're given. So it's very serious business when it comes to that level.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. Okay, so you kind of mentioned you got constitutional carry, you got open carry, and then concealed carry. Okay, there's a lot of questions for maybe those that aren't in the know. You have constitutional carry, which means you can have it. What is the advantage, or what would your recommendation be in having the concealed carry permit?
Well, one advantage we talked about some of the advantages, such as reciprocity arrangements with the majority of states. Another advantage, I suppose, is when you go and purchase a new firearm, that having the concealed carry permit will streamline that process.
Does it provide any protection that the constitutional carry does not? in terms of your rights and whatnot in having that gun?
Well, it does, as I mentioned, allows you to have a loaded long gun in a vehicle. But as far as the places that you can take a weapon, or the manner in which you can carry or transport the weapon, such as in a vehicle, on your person, someplace like that, there are no important differences that I can think of. I think the principal differences, the important differences, I think you leave the state and go to a state with reciprocity, you still have protection. You can carry a loaded long gun in a vehicle. Excuse me, which brings me to another point I don't want to forget to make. Not all gun people are hunters, I understand that, but of course many are. There's a lot of misconception I've noticed in the state of Utah about whether the concealed carry permit or constitutional carry would allow a person to carry a loaded handgun, meaning round in the firing position, or long gun while they're actually hunting. Okay, if you are actually hunting, then the concealed carry permit and also constitutional carry does not allow you to carry a loaded gun in the vehicle while you are hunting. That's still unlawful.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's a separate theory. That's under the umbrella of we want to put limitations on firepower so that hunting is sportsmanlike. People
Right.
are not shooting from loaded vehicles at wild game, or stepping out of the vehicle and immediately firing. And I think there's also probably a safety consideration involved in that. But yes, a lot of people are under the misperception rather, that they can carry a loaded gun in their vehicle while they're hunting. And I should probably say in or on, because the cases that I've seen, usually it's people who are on four-wheelers, on ATVs, who encounter law enforcement at a checkpoint, or they're checking for valid license and things like that, and then they have rifle in the scabbard on the ATV and around in the firing position. They get a ticket for that.
What is that ticket? How much does it affect their ability to hunt or have the guns?
You know what? I'm embarrassed. I would have to review that, but I think it'd be a misdemeanor charge, but it could, possibly affect your hunting rights, at least in the short term. So people should just be aware of that.
Yeah.
And some people are looking for an unfair advantage in hunting, and I know that from a lot of experience in representing people who are charged with violating game laws, but in order to get the advantage in the hunt, it's just not worth it, and it's just also not worth the safety risk.
It's two movements. It's not. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Ridiculous argument in my opinion. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Right.
can I ask you, Steve, why criminal? Why criminal law? What was that? Because there's so many laws to choose from these days. What attracted you to this business?
Boy, that's another very good question. It sounds like I'm trying to sell you life insurance because I keep complimenting on your questions, but no, you're
That's why they keep me around.
You're setting me up to to say something important or interesting. When I went to law school, like a lot of people, I imagine, I felt like what I saw on TV and movies about lawyering was like some reflection of reality, and it's not. It's all way over dramatized, and if you watch Perry Mason, Della Street, his secretary is a genius, and he has one case at a time, and he always wins.
Yeah.
It'd be great to be Perry Mason, but the reality of the law business is it's just a tough business. And I found out after I got into it that if you're in private practice, that the majority of people who ever hire a lawyer are probably hiring a lawyer because they're getting divorced, or they've had a child out of wedlock and have parent time, similar parent time, child support type issues, or else they're filing bankruptcy. And that's probably at least 2/3 of the people who are hiring a lawyer one time in their life, I think, are doing it for that reason. Criminal defense, it's a little bit difficult to fill your pipe or fill your dance card, so to speak, with criminal defense type cases. But I think that they're interesting, and there's an opportunity to help people who are worthy of a little help. I do it for profit, I'll admit that. But I think a lot of people have the misconception that what I'm doing is partnering with hardened criminals and helping them deceive the court. I would characterize it's more like I'm the pastor of their parish and I'm helping them come to Jesus. That's how I would characterize it. In other words, a lot of people, they just have a really bad day where they are under a lot of pressure, and
choices.
They made some poor choices. They exercised some poor judgment, and now they got to fix it. And so I do that. But I suppose to answer your question, why that over other things? I do many things, as a solo practitioner or as a member of a very small firm. But I just enjoy, I guess, the stories. It's interesting to see the stories and see what happens. And honestly, it's one of the less stressful things I do. I do other things, other areas of practice. I've done many divorces. I've done a lot of probate litigation. I've done a lot of contract litigation. Sometimes criminal law is very stressful when you're involved in narratives of just heinous and deplorable events. It can be, but usually it's not. Usually, what I'm doing is I'm helping people, fix a problem they have so life can go on.
Go ahead. I'm
Well, I
sorry.
could kind of speak to that too. Obviously, Steve and I work together. The difference is there's a couple of big differences. Number one, the court process, criminal law is completely different than all the other laws. In criminal law, the court sets the schedule. Okay, so there's a system and a process to how a criminal case goes through the system. Whereas if you're doing a divorce,
You're waiting.
Party A has to get with Party B, then they have to have a meeting to set the meeting to have with the court. Like there's a lot more
Proof and different
yeah,
things.
and it just sucks. And then you're arguing over who gets the dog this week, who gets the
Right.
who gets the John Elway signed football, and that nobody's taken out of the closet for 15 years.
It's a great
That sort of
football,
thing.
yeah.
It's a
And
good
then
football,
You had kids, and that amplifies
amplifies the whole thing, and then you're the emotional tie to it. They're so heated in a divorce that it just makes everything more stressful. Where it's like we have kind of a saying around the office, whether true or not. 99% of our clients, they're good people that did something stupid. If it wasn't for stupid, we wouldn't be in business. Very few of them are actually like the cold, hard criminals that you see on TV.
Yeah.
Dexter, right? And honestly, in my opinion, maybe you can speak to this. The ones that most of them, like the DUIs, even the gun charges and whatnot, to some level, and you can kind of empathize and you can get understand what happened. The real cases that are really, really bad are the child molestation. When comes in, or children are hurt in any way, shape, or form, that's where the criminal law really gets tough. That's my opinion anyway. What would you say to that, Steve?
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. But another comment that comes to mind, which I hope is entertaining, and I'm just not wandering into the weeds. The only happy thing that ever happens in the courthouse is an adoption. Child with only one parent gets two parents, and if that family functions well, that's a very good thing for that child. But law, when I say it's a tough business, one aspect of that is that whenever people are in court, they're in litigation, emotions are high, the tension level is high. There's a lot at stake. People are very emotional, and they tend to be at their worst. I think that's an accurate characterization based on 24 years of experience of doing it.
Well, So I'm in a business where it's very emotional, and it's easy to buy into it. It's easy to be mad. It's easy to feel those feelings. How do you stay distant and what's the word I'm looking for here? You keep
Compartmentalize?
not compartmentalize, but you're objective. You're still objective on the
Keep the disconnect.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure that the experience of all the people that have, pursued the practice of law as their occupation or profession have had different experiences that still have a common denominator. It's easier for me now than it first was. And when I say at first, I'm talking about a period of like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. After 15 or 20 years of doing it, I can compartmentalize it easier than I could at first. Another comment that comes to mind is that it's important as a business that you can make customers feel like that you care about them, you care about their situation, you've got their back. If they don't feel you caring about them, then they're going to pick one of your competitors many times, and so they have to have the experience of really feeling that they've got a friend in their attorney. But at the same time, one reason that I have a job, I think, is to infuse highly emotional situations with some logic and common sense. In other words, when emotions are running high and people are primarily interested in vindicating their principle, it's good to have a voice that says, look at this as a business decision. Look at this as a problem that's costing you a great deal, and find the least expensive way to fix it.
Wow. I like how you say that, because really what you're saying is it more important to be right or to be less harmed? Because people being right sometimes isn't the easiest way to, even if I think I'm right, I'm innocent, or whatever that is, that might not necessarily be the right answer.
And litigants, they can choose their path. My ethical responsibility to them is to allow them to do that, is to give them competent advice, but allow them to make their own decision. But I think, especially as I've gotten older and I become more seasoned in the business, I have some very direct talks with a lot of clients if I feel like they're being foolish. And of course, the art is to help them understand the rationale of the advice without experiencing it as a personal affront or criticism.
So you don't start out the conversation, listen, stupid. That's not
Stop breaking the law.
I appreciate how wrong you are right now, but
I'll give Steve this. He does get some of the trickier clients that we have come through for this exact reason. We call it Steve going into John Wayne mode.
Oh.
Okay, because he has a really good, and it's kind of funny when you watch him. He sits up, his whole posture changes when they gets these clients on. And he's like, okay, now knock it off. Here's what is going to happen.
Well, and on that topic, perhaps in our audience there will be people who are grappling with this very issue. They've got a problem with the law. They're looking for representation. They're trying to make a good decision about what lawyer they choose, and everybody wants to feel like they've made a good decision. But without getting too specific, some unsolicited advice that I would give people in that situation, understanding that people usually want unsolicited advice, even from a lawyer when they have a legal problem. They want to ask for it first. But there are certain members of the legal profession who I think have something of an unhealthy symbiotic relationship where they play into the client's passion in order to, they fuel the client's passion in order to win them over. And depending on the circumstances, very often they're not doing them a favor. Very often I feel like at least they should be the voice of reason, telling them to find another way out of this problem rather than, just
telling them they're right.
Yeah, and telling them they're right when they're not right, like fueling their anger.
It's like a parent being a parent instead of a friend.
Yes.
You got to tell them when they're not right.
It's interesting,
Yes.
though, that if you take ego out of the equation, what do you want most? I want you to be honest with me. Please tell me the truth. But when I've got my ego involved and I think I'm right, this is what that other guy did, and that guy's a jerk. I want to get whatever. That would be a very difficult mind shift to make. Like, when I was talking about being objective, that's really what I was talking about. Is like, I've got to bring you around because that's my job. The problem that I can see with your job is a lot of people don't want you to be honest with them.
Yeah, interesting point, because my own opinion, and recognizing I'm not a licensed therapist, I don't have a credential like that.
You should have one after 20 years.
But I think what life has taught me is that like honesty and respect is the only legitimate foundation of any relationship. That you can't have human interaction that is a positive interaction without honesty and respect. But you can imagine, as you said, people come in to a lawyer's office, they've been in charge of the crime, whether it's a serious crime or not, but they're not really honest with their lawyer. Many of them, tell the lawyer what they think the lawyer needs to hear in order for the lawyer to go and do what the client would like them to do. That's not every case, certainly, but it does happen not infrequently. And that's a problem, because the lawyer, like a computer, it's not going to process the information in a way that's any better than the raw data itself.
Yeah.
If you put incorrect data in the computer, it's going to give you, it's going to give you a bad outcome. and conversely, it's also true, as I mentioned before, certain members of the profession, if they agree with the client, if they encourage them in a thinking error that they're having, or a pursuit that is inadvisable, or a strategy that's inadvisable, not only is that client not getting the benefit, of having good legal advice, this relationship is already in trouble. And as a client, I'm sure that nobody would want to, or they shouldn't want to be represented by a lawyer who's not having a good relationship with them.
It's interesting. The consequence of that relationship is the effect of that consequence is borne by the client. If you give poor advice as an attorney and it doesn't work out the way that you had anticipated, well, you're not the one going to jail. That would be the client going to jail. And so it really makes me think, if I were to be looking for a criminal defense attorney, what are some of the key components that I really want besides that honesty and integrity? Like, if I were to come in and I'm interviewing, what are the top 2 or 3 things that I need to keep in mind in order to choose someone that's going to represent my interests best?
Well, boy, another great question.
Thank you.
I think that one comment that comes to mind is that lawyers are a bunch of status seekers. Not all of them, but as a group, they are. Lawyers are very caught up in, where did you go to school? What was your class rank?
What do you drive?
Yeah, 30 years later, after all this water has gone under the bridge, lawyers so many of them are interested in, what was the status of the law school they attended, what was their class rank. But I think what really helps lawyers succeed in the practice of law, like many other professions, many other industries, is having common sense and people skills. I would tell people who are looking for a lawyer to pay attention to their own feelings, to listen to themselves, and ask themselves, who makes you feel comfortable? Okay, who are you comfortable with? Who do you feel like you can trust to be straight with you? That's really important. Obviously, it would be great to get a referral from somebody who's used that lawyer's services, if you know someone, or if there are problems with lawyers just giving names of former clients out. There's a confidentiality issue there, so that's a little tricky, a little complicated. But I would say ask the lawyer how long they've been doing those kind of cases. Ask the lawyer excuse me. Ask a lawyer why they would recommend themselves as opposed to some non-specific other individual competitor.
It's a good idea. So the interview question would be, Steve, this is the trouble that I'm having. This is what the help that I'm looking for. Why are you the best in the business at it?
Yeah. Or, if not the best, why should I hire you? What's the benefit of hiring you versus,
Why are we a
a
good fit?
randomly selected person of like similar background? What do I get for choosing you?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't hold myself out as being, singularly unique. That's pretentious and dishonest. I mean, there's a lot of very capable people in the legal profession and some that are less than capable. But having said that, I think the way that I would answer that question, one way that I would answer that question, I think, is that I would assure the client that they can trust that I'll always be real straight with them. I'll always tell them what I feel they need to know, that I won't hold back if I have advice for them, if I have a take on something or opinion about something that affects them, I'm going to tell them about it. I'm going to tell them straight. I'm going to do that in a respectful way and then let them make their decision, but I'm not going to let them make a decision without the benefit of my advice because I'm concerned that I may lose their business.
And that's the rub. That's the real rub. If you're hiring a real estate agent, I'm a real estate agent, so what you're saying really applies to me.
Yeah.
An attorney, I lose business because I say, I know that other person told you could sell your home for $1 million, but it's only worth $750,000. That's what it's really worth. It's hard to do that because I know I'm going to lose the business. It's hard to be that person, but I always benefit in asking in that regard. And I'm not trying to turn this towards me, but I've never really done the comparison with an attorney saying, well, here's this is my opinion of how this is going to go down, and then you get a second opinion from an attorney, and they're like, oh no, I'm going to get you off 100%. It would be hard not to buy into the bullshit. Is what I'm saying. Like, I want to get off. I don't want to go to jail for my bad day, and so that's a tricky. It would be a tricky thing to choose an attorney that's got your best interest in mind.
But at the end of the day, when you don't get $1 million or you don't get off,
Yeah, you can imagine what the situation would be like. A client believing they could win at trial, who proceeds to trial, and then they're convicted at trial, especially convicted of serious crime or crimes, and what they really needed is the right advisor to talk them out of that strategy, and they didn't have it. In the end, although it's the client's prerogative to choose the objective, if they end up in a far worse place because they didn't get the right advice, of course that's the lawyer's failing. It's the client's failing if they didn't listen to good advice. But to not receive it, that would be one of the worst scenarios I can imagine.
So that seems to me almost like a malpractice. I can't think of a better word, but a malpractice in a doctor's case for him misdiagnosing or whatever. Is there any? Do you hold any liability looking backwards on poor advice?
Oh, certainly. And certainly one of the licensing issues, and there's an organization called the Utah State Bar. It is a state agency. It licenses lawyers. It monitors the conduct of lawyers. But in the canon of professional ethics for lawyers, one of those ethical duties is to provide competent representation. So aside from having a license, merely having the license to practice law, okay, that's a licensing issue, but there is a separate competency issue. Because you have a license doesn't necessarily mean that you're competent to provide a certain service. That's a separate thing, and a lawyer who does not provide competent services is subject to discipline, potentially.
With that licensing board, is there a certain number of continuing education hours that you need to get annually?
Yes, right now the requirement is that licensed lawyers, to maintain their license, complete 12 continuing education hours per year.
And are there mandatory hours associated, like ethics is a part of, like that you have to do it every 4 years or something like that?
Yeah, so every year, I think the requirement is right now that the 12 hours that you need to complete and document every year, that one of those hours has to be in ethics, and I think one of them has to be in what they call professionalism and civility. So there's one of the downsides of being a member of the legal profession is, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of friction. There are rules that govern lawyers just simply being professional, being courteous and decent to each other in a situation that's, high conflict, emotionally charged. A lot of, bad behavior can still be curtailed, at least hopefully.
And that would be managed by the licensing, the bar, the Utah State Bar. They're the ones that manage it, and they have they would probably have a committee for complaints and all of those things where they're managing that on the regular, like keeping an eye on their industry.
That's correct. I'm certainly not an expert on like the procedural aspect of disciplinary actions, because I've never had one.
Congratulations.
I don't want to overshare.
That's the goal.
Knock on
but
wood.
You never have one.
I don't want to overshare, but I've had situations where somebody complained to the bar, and the bar made me respond, but I've never gone down the road of actually being in disciplinary action.
Gotcha.
All the complaints I've ever been involved in were terminated at that level, just the inquiry or investigation level. But yes, for somebody who has a concern that their lawyer has engaged in unethical conduct as it affects them, that is the forum to begin a grievance process, is the Utah State Bar.
Well, that's probably a really important point to touch on real fast. If you've been practicing law for 20 years, 20 plus years, you're going to have, somebody's going to complain to the bar. Not everybody is happy, it's just inevitable to have happen. I don't think that you should dock somebody, if you haven't had a bar complaint once or twice, you haven't been practicing enough, you haven't tried enough cases. But for you to say that, where there hasn't been any disciplinary, anybody can make a complaint to the bar, they will investigate it, and yours have all been cut off right at the jump street of that initial inquiry.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Is that public record? Like, if somebody was going to choose a lawyer, can they research if they have had complaints at the bar?
Yes.
Yes,
that information is publicly available.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, shifting gears a little bit away from the ethics of the business. When I've done interviews or I've talked to people, I find myself, I ask good questions. I'm a pretty good judge of character. The questions that you're asking, the story that you're hearing, that you're learning that, okay, this is what happened, and then what happened, and then what happened. Let's go over it again. What do you do in order to make sure that you're getting to really the meat of the instance or the truth of the story?
Well, there is a procedure that is routinely utilized. It's known, lawyers call it discovery. So when a person is charged with a crime, one of their rights is to have a copy of any records that are contained in the prosecutor's file. It's necessary to invoke that right by requesting that in writing, but once the request in writing is made, the prosecutors have to provide you with a copy of whatever records that they have that they've used in their investigation, or that police who are involved in the investigation have just turned over to them. You're entitled to have that. And as an attorney, one of the important services that I'm providing to anybody who's charged with a public offense, or in other words, a crime, is that I am evaluating the case by using that as one source of information also. So of course, it's important that, because the client can tell me their version of events, tell me that information, but then I also have the ability to see, what other people are saying, so I can imagine, especially having, been to, well over 100 trials in my life and being a lawyer in those trials, I can visualize what the cast of characters are going to be, who is going to come, what they're going to say, how that's going to play for the jury in light of what else the jury is going to know about that person. that sort of thing. That's really a very important part of the service that I'm providing. Is after I look at all these different sources of information, I have a pretty good idea about how this is going to go for them if it goes to the mat, so to speak. Now, another, I think, fact worth mentioning is the vast majority of criminal cases, I don't know a actual number, but I would estimate it 97 or 98% of those cases settle. So most cases are not going to trial.
Wow.
Okay? Most cases are settling, like almost all cases settle. And the reason for that, I think, is that when you have an attorney on each side of the aisle, you have a prosecutor, you have a defense attorney, both of them are looking at the same evidence, even though, for example, some witnesses may be lying, but both attorneys are considering all these moving parts, and they can come to an agreement about a range of likely outcomes, and it's apparent enough. Usually it ends in a settlement, and part of the reason for that too is that prosecutors' offices and the courts don't have the resources to have a trial in every one of these cases, and so it has value to the system to offer defendants a concession, a discount, if you will, in order to settle the case, because even expending the resource of the court's time, a judge, a bailiff, a clerk, prosecutor, all that, it has value. So if people are concerned if they've been charged with a crime or crimes, it might give them some relief to know that if their strategy is basically to be honest and own up to all of this, although it's a mistake in my opinion for anyone to ever just go in and throw themselves on the mercy of the court. But what they should know is that any competent attorney should be able to make an arrangement to mitigate the consequences of the whole incident just by having a conversation with the prosecutor's office. That's an important service that attorneys offer, although you don't see that on dramatizations of courtroom drama. That's an aspect of lawyering that you don't often see.
Right. Well, it makes good sense that we can negotiate and talk this out as adults and come to an agreement. It seems like that would be a much more efficient way to go than dragging in a jury of impartial people. All right. Again, I'm shifting gears. You ready?
Yes.
I'm just running.
Go ahead, but I've got some stuff to unload on you too.
All right.
Go ahead.
So my question is, now as the specialist that you are and a criminal defense attorney, I get pulled over for something. What are some of the most common mistakes, or what's some of the things I can do to protect myself in order from incriminating myself unnecessarily? Because I'm an idiot. I'm just going to start just telling you, officer, everything since I was 7 years old I've done wrong. What can I do to protect myself?
Well, I'm reminded of the saying that a wise man once said nothing. In other words, it's probably not a poor maxim to say never miss a good opportunity to shut up. Having said that,
using words to say that.
Having said that, another thing that comes to mind, I have seen a lot of videos, a lot of reels, I think is the popular term, various social media platforms, other places where lay people are giving very bad advice about how to handle an encounter with law enforcement.
That's really where my question comes from. I've seen a few of those and thought, that seems like a terrible idea.
Okay. One thing that people should be aware of, okay, judges are really smart people, okay, and you would think that a judge would be a smart person, but one thing that I've noticed over the years is that most people still underestimate them, and the relevance of that point is that the case law recognizes, okay, that police work is where the rubber meets the road.
That's right.
Okay, and this is not like a fair and a kind world out there in the world of law enforcement. And if you're going to have police that are going to be able to enforce the laws, you have to cut them some slack. in the way that they handle very volatile and potentially dangerous situations.
In the second, they only have a second to make a decision. Yes,
That's right. Okay, and so a police officer pulls you over and says license and registration, and you roll up the window and lock the door and stick your license on the door. That's not going to fly. Okay, the law is going to give that police officer the discretion to say, no, I need you to roll down your window. No, I need you to unlock your door. No, I need you to turn the car off. Okay, no, I need you to put the keys in the console on the floor, or or give them to me. And there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the law, as far as stop and detention. Of course, as you know, having had 8 years of experience as a police officer. But my advice to anybody, okay, who is being encountered by law enforcement, first of all, to have the right to identify, okay, they don't really need to they definitely don't need to have what lawyers know as probable cause. Now I'm getting off in the weeds in technical terms. But what the law requires for them to make an initial encounter and simply identify you is any type of articulable suspicion that they can point to. Okay, you're parked out in the middle of the parking lot in the mall. You're all by yourself in the car in the middle of the night. You're sitting there. Is that suspicious? Well, I think most people would say, well, it's a little suspicious, at least. Is this person committing a crime by simply being there? Well, not necessarily, but what does that allow law enforcement to do? Okay, well, can they detain you? Well, the short answer is yes, but only for a moment. It would not be inappropriate for that police officer to simply identify you. So if it's discovered later that a crime was committed, they have some idea who is in that place at a relevant time, so that they have some ability to begin investigation if they discover that later. Now, another thing to keep in mind that most people I think are not aware of, because police officers are police officers, whether they're wearing a uniform or not. But imagine the situation, excuse me, you're walking down the sidewalk and a police officer is walking the other way, or maybe they're riding a bike, like we have bicycle patrol in Salt Lake City, and they stop and say hello. How are you? I'm Officer Smith. Who are you? This is what is known in the law as a level 1 encounter. So in other words, the fact that they're police officers doesn't mean that they can't talk to strangers like other people, as long as their behavior is otherwise lawful. They're not detaining anybody. A lot of people are under the mistaken impression that they're being detained because a uniformed officer is talking to them. But it's not unlawful for a uniformed officer just to have casual conversations with strangers as they go about their business. Now, in order to detain a person, okay, there has to be a reason, and there's many reasons I can think of that would give a police officer grounds to detain a person. But the most common concept that arises in that context is the concept of probable cause. Probable cause has been defined by the appellate courts as a situation where a reasonable person in the police officer's position, okay, in light of all of this facts and circumstances can be observed, okay, would conclude that it's at least more likely than not that a crime has been committed or has been in the process of being committed, and that the person they're detaining committed that. Okay, that is grounds for a detention. And the law in Utah is that police officers can make an arrest, okay, for either a felony or a misdemeanor that is committed in their presence. Okay, they can also make an arrest of a suspected felon if the crime is not committed in their presence and the circumstances don't otherwise require them to get a warrant, such as the suspect going into their residence under circumstances that are not necessarily exigent. But that's usually the context in which a detention arrives. Police officers, have an objective reason to suspect that a crime has been committed. And on that point, I think it's also important for people to know that a lot of people get hung up, say they get pulled over, and they're concerned, well, I got pulled over because of the color of my skin, because I have, tattoos that show, because they didn't like my car, my car had bumper stickers they didn't like, or that, my car is really, tricked out, and they didn't like that, so they picked on me. What the courts do on that question is they've said they're not going to try to get in the heads of police officers to see what's the actual motive is by trying to pick their brain or read their mind. The question the court asks is whether the objective circumstances that a police officer could observe would support the detention, and if the objective circumstances support the detention, they're not going to get into subjective intent.
Perfect.
Interesting. But that's kind of in the nitty gritty. Okay, for your average person, me, I'm riding my motorcycle, I get pulled over or something like that. And maybe you could speak a little bit more to this. One of the things that I know my dad taught me this, and I'm sure, you go back generations, if you get caught with something or you're getting in trouble for something, in this country, you get a beautiful thing that you have the right to a lawyer, you have the right to a court date. Okay, that's when your fight actually happens. A lot of people think that they can come in and then the reels and whatnot that you're talking about, where these people are trying to recite the law to the police officer, that's not really, okay, number one, they're wrong more often than they're not, but number two, that's not the time for you to have that fight. The best thing that you could do, and the advice I think that you would give to anybody anytime you're doing, is to shut up until you get to the lawyer. Would that be fair?
Yes. And, a lot of people, as you said it well, I think, that is not the forum or the context where you're going to win that argument. My advice to someone would be that, if they feel like the officer's conduct is inappropriate, okay, they might ask for that officer to radio a supervisor, okay, and he may refuse to do it. But if they arrest you and put you in jail unlawfully, what you really need to do is contact a lawyer and then bring a grievance or even a lawsuit against the offending officer or the agency if you feel their conduct is unlawful after receiving a lawyer's advice. But obviously you're not going to win the argument right on the street. The police officer has a right to control the situation for their own safety. Just don't argue. Shut up.
No, I think that's something that everybody on those, because we've all seen those videos. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. Like you get to have a court date. You're going to have a court date for this. Don't argue with the cop, because more times than not, you're just going to make it worse for yourself. And then if you piss the cop off, okay, he has, like you said, he has the right to. Now he's really going to be paying attention to what's going on around him, and he's going to write up everything that he can possibly write up. Yeah,
and I think another piece of advice that I would give to people who may face that situation, which will be everyone, I think, or nearly everyone at one time or another, is that police officers are human beings. That may be under the heading of duh, but I think a lot of people would benefit from being reminded of that. These are human beings, and they probably have a family, they probably have a wife, they probably have children, they have people that they love who love them. They want to get home safely and see those people, and they when they have a bad day at work and they carry some of the emotional baggage from the bad day at work home, that affects their family life. These are human beings. I don't want to overshare again. I haven't had a traffic ticket in a lot more than a decade. Doesn't mean I haven't been stopped. But I talked my way out of all the tickets, and it wasn't a law degree that allowed me to do that at all. It was just common sense, and to be courteous, to be respectful, to be cooperative, And now that I've said this, I hope that all those police officers are not watching. They'll come and give me a ticket for sure next time and make it stick. But just simply being.
I heard your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. But simply being polite and cooperative goes a long way, because these are just human beings that want to get home to their families like the rest of us.
Yeah.
The way I look at it oftentimes is like, people, when they go to restaurants, they usually treat the people that make their food very well, right? Because you don't want your food to get screwed with. You want to have good food. Why would you treat someone who has the ability to put handcuffs on you, put you in the back of a car and take you to jail? Why would you treat them poorly? Just treat them well. You'll have a better outcome.
Yeah.
Well, and it goes without saying, a lot of people, would argue with me and say, but there's bad cops out there, and, without a doubt. And my comment in response to that kind of comment is that police departments are operated by municipalities, in other words, cities or counties. And the politicians, such as mayors or county commissioners, who are in charge of decision making for operating that entity, one of the big liabilities that they have is if they have an incompetent police force, a police force that routinely violates people's civil rights. That's an enormous liability. And in order to be a municipality that has a police department, you also have to be able to buy insurance policies that insure the police, the police department from complaints, lawsuits from the public, and they've got to be insurable. And so the relevance of all that is, if there is a bad cop, the likelihood that he or she will get weeded out by their own department, I think, is very high. There's bad cops out there. I don't think they last in the system.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, I'm going to do a hard switch here, because one of the things that I find pretty interesting about you, Steve, is, and I'm going to unveil this to everybody else here. It is your background and how you got to being a lawyer. And one of the things that we really care about here is mindset and how you go through this. So I want to know. So for everybody listening, Steve was a Division I football player. You played for the U, right? As a defensive end?
For a time, I practiced with the team. I played at Wyoming.
Oh, you played at Wyoming?
Before that, yeah.
Interesting.
For
okay.
1 year, yeah.
Okay, and then you were actually a teacher before you became a lawyer.
I was a public school teacher. For a time, I taught secondary English for 6 years, and then I at the community college level for like 1 year.
Interesting.
And I was a teaching assistant at Utah State while I was doing a master's degree in English many years ago.
Okay, and then the third thing I kind of want to bring up, and I've got a point to this, so stay with me, all right? And then you also are very involved with animals and livestock and whatnot. You actually are a cowboy in a sense. That you tell us just a little bit about the horseshoeing.
Yeah, well, there was, as a boy growing up, my maternal grandfather especially, he was from a working farm, working ranch, and he left the ranch and he became a lawyer. But so although he left the farm, I think the farm never left him, and so I was exposed to that, and I admired him a great deal, and I learned about horses. I learned to shoot horses, and there was a day where I wanted to return to school and didn't have the ability to finance it, so I thought, well, how will I do this? And the solution I came up with is to shoe horses as a business. And I didn't realize at first how big the gap was between me and the real pros. But I closed the gap when my economic survival depended upon it for a time. That's really how I financed law school. So there was, in my 30s, which was the 1990s, that's getting to be, people my age think about the 90s and they think, oh man, that was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago, but it's actually 30.
Trust me, I'm
how'd that
aware.
happen?
It's funnier if you're an old guy like me.
I'm laughing.
Yeah. But
These kids were born then.
Yeah.
But I supported myself by being the term is a farrier. It's an antiquated term, Farrier. Farrier, a shoer of horses, a blacksmith specifically, who is also a shoer of horses, and that's how I supported myself in my 30s. That's how I financed law school.
Did you have the truck and the whole thing, because I've seen those farrier trucks, and
Yeah.
they have, you got the iron on the back, all the stuff to shape the shoes, and it's a big process. There's a lot involved in being a reasonable, competent farrier.
Yes, and an interesting aspect of that particular trade is that there is, as far as I'm aware at least, there's no state in the United States that issues a license for farriers. I think there are some states where you have to have a license to be a plater on a racetrack, on a state-owned racetrack. So the government is not regulating the industry.
It's the Wild West.
It's the Wild West as far as regulation, but the market regulates the industry to do well in the business of being a farrier. You have to have top drawer skills. It's I would recommend to somebody, if they consider being a farrier, if they didn't feel real passion for it, they should consider it a different trade, because you won't, I think, actually be able to do well unless you have real passion for it. It's like being a guitar player.
It's an artist.
Yeah, in a sense.
I've known a farrier or two
Yeah.
in my day, and in order to do it well, you have to. There's an eye for not laming the horse and doing it well, and doing it that they won't get thrown easily, and all those things. That's impressive. Hats off to you.
Yeah, people do it on different levels, of course, and
Sure.
I've heard people who are at the very top of the trade that are famous among other farriers say things like it's something that truly cannot be mastered. It's too difficult to truly be mastered. Well, having said that, mastery is relative, I think.
Sure.
To gain a level of mastery where you would be like successful in the business of doing it, you have to be someone who's fairly obsessed with it.
How far down the obsession train did you get?
Oh, I'm fairly obsessed with it. I would describe my skills as well above average, good, maybe very good, but not outstanding. But I've really, in addition to like what else I've done since that time, I've really paid some dues in that business. I spent so much time like making horseshoes by hand that I threw away just for practice. It wouldn't make any sense to the casual observer. It's just something I just really wanted to do because it was in me.
Well, and you also, now this is kind of interesting, you also own these animals too, but you're more on the mules, right?
Yeah, I've owned horses in my life, which people have a hard time understanding. If you're a school teacher and you own a horse, how do you do that? Well, you shoe a lot of horses. That's one way. But yeah, now that I'm old and I don't bounce like I used to, I have some mules. I have some mules that I prefer. There was a day where people who had unruly horses would lend me their horse. They're hoping I would fix it for it under the guise of doing me a favor. I was fixing their problems. But, I've known for some time that when I got to be a certain age, that if I was, still climbing in the saddle, I'd probably just find myself a good mule, and that's what I've done.
Well,
that's
why
maybe
is
a
that?
topic for a different podcast. But, well, and now we're getting off in the cowboy weeds. Nothing I can say about this topic is let me say, one of the most annoying things about mule people, the horse people, is they won't shut up about their mules. That's the way it is.
I was gonna say,
You should meet guys that own Indian motorcycles.
Yeah,
Right? They won't quit talking about it.
right.
Fuck up.
According to like what I've read, historians, anthropologists say somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, people quit just eating horses that were in a domestic herd and started training them, using them for transportation. And what's really interesting, it's not very long after that we start seeing evidence of mules, which is, you know, a cross between a female horse and male donkey, Andalusian donkey specifically. They're large donkey, but so mules show up almost as soon as people are riding horses. And not being a professional anthropologist, one of my opinions is very interesting to me is that nothing shapes the military history of the world until the invention of the airplane more than the development of cavalry. So in other words, it seems to me that for 4,000 years, who ruled the world in terms of military might had a great deal to do with who had cavalry. In the British Empire, that is, the quintessential example of imperialism, I suppose. That is one aspect of British culture. The cavalry culture, culture in the British military to this day is exemplary, to the world, if you would. But of course, it's not the automobile so much that displaces the importance of the horse and welfare as much as the airplane, in my opinion, because the airplane can do something that similar to the horse, and that it can go places where there are no roads. And that's really what the horse, and of course, like motorized vehicles are getting better all the time, but I would contend that they are still no match for a good horse, a good mule. But your question about the differences in mules, the folklore, the word on the street about mules is that they're smart, but they're also stubborn and mean, and not to me, but of course I'm the guy that climbs under a live horse and trims its feet with razor sharp tools and nails shoes on it, and being under a horse. So I'm probably not exemplary of how it would be for most people. But
who's ornery here?
Right. But mules, their brain is wired just a little different. And there's things that horses do better than mules. They're generally run faster than mules. They're usually almost always lighter in the bridle, more responsive, more sensitive to cues from the bit or the reins or legs, But mules' brains, when there's a crisis or there's a threat, okay, they don't spook as easily. Typically, they always think about where they're stepping before they step, even in the midst of a crisis, which would be a good thing, I think, for people to do too. When the heat is turned way up, do you react? Do you think about it before you make a move? Mules, they tend to do that, and they are very opinionated about people. If you have a group of mules and a group of people that are going to go ride these mules, the mules belong to an outfitter. There may be one person in that group for whatever reason. Maybe they're loud. Maybe they gesticulate wildly. Maybe they wear some funny smelling cheap aftershave. But it's not unusual that there's just a person in that group that the mules don't take to for whatever reason. But if you're going to ride through the mountains 30 miles by yourself, I would recommend that you take a good mule. And there's some great trail horses. I'm not taking that away, but what I would say to maybe quarter horse people, for example, that got a quarter horse that's just a great trail horse, I say if you got a quarter horse that will walk as far and as fast with as much strength, endurance, and not spook easily like a mule, definitely don't sell him.
It's a rare thing.
Now we got from gun rights to mules.
That's how this goes.
Hang on tight. This is what we do here.
Oh, man. Okay. So we got mules and football background. So now my question is okay, so you've got those completely different and kind of obscure to the law. Okay, how does that shape how you handle the mental strain and the approach with your clients? Using that, your teaching comes out, because I've seen it. I call it your John Wayne. Your John Wayne comes out. I know you've wrestled with mules, so wrestling with clients is something, when you have a need for that, that's a tool that you pull out and you use. So how has that really shaped your mindset in practicing law in the back half of your career?
Boy, well, another very good question. We're like a mutual admiration society here. But, one thing that life has taught me, whether it's being a school teacher, being a lawyer, being a horse trainer, or a horse farrier, is the importance of choice. When you train a horse, what you have to do is you have to create a situation where the horse understands what is wanted. But the horse always has a choice. He can do what's wanted, or he can do, something else. And the horse will always do, I think, if he doesn't respect you, what he thinks he can get away with, or if he does respect you, what he thinks that you want. Or the third category is he will do whatever he feels is necessary just simply to survive. But what you do as a horse trainer, if you want to make a good horse, you create a situation where the horse now has to make a choice, and you're encouraging him to make the right choice, so that becomes a habit. Okay, he gets in the habit of making the right choice, and when the horse routinely makes the right choice, then you have a trained horse. And the reason that horse will learn to make that right choice, I don't feel that he has a moral sense like most humans, where he's discerning right and wrong. He simply does what he believes, what he has learned by experience is the easier option. It works better for him. It results in less distress, less conflict, less problems, so he learns to choose it. Well, maybe it's under the heading of maybe it's trite, but with people too. You can't change a person's mind by telling them they're wrong. Okay? You can't usually change a person's mind by arguing with them. You can't change the way they think or the way that they do things by simply confronting them. So how do you do that? One way I think that you do that is, you illustrate what it is that you want them to understand with examples, with narratives, which I suppose is a subcategory of an example, or a way of presenting an example. Anyway, that's one thing that comes to mind. I don't know how interesting or how useful that is, but with the example of a client, without doing anything that would disclose the identity of another client, because that would be a breach of confidentiality, which is a very serious ethical problem, is to give them examples of other narratives, other scenarios where people were faced with like similar problems, and give examples of how they addressed it, what the outcome was, and just let them consider all that and let them make the choice, which is my ethical responsibility to them. Is to be a competent advisor, to give them advice, but ultimately the choice is theirs.
Okay. All right. So we're wrapping this. We're gonna wrap this down now. I've got 5 questions I think left here. Okay. 2 are gonna go real fast. These are more for me because I'm morbidly curious because of stuff that's going on right now. First question: how do DAs become DAs?
They get a law degree, and you're talking about the district attorney. You're talking about the prosecutors, okay? And
is it an election process?
No, okay. So the district attorneys, yes, they are elected. And when I say district, it might help some of the listeners to understand that the term district is thrown around a lot. We have district courts in the state of Utah. Where that name comes from is that they divide the state of Utah into districts that are comprised of anywhere from 3 to 5 counties. I think there's 30 counties in the state of Utah, or something very close to that. But there are 8 judicial districts in the state of Utah, and that just refers to a geographic region of several counties in the state that they call, it is a subdivision of the state court system. District attorneys, on the other hand, who are the prosecutors, at least one category of prosecutors who are authorized by statute to prosecute crimes in the state of Utah, is part of the county attorney's office for whatever county. And the county attorney or the district attorney is an elected official, and the assistant district attorney, so licensed attorneys who also work under their supervision as prosecutors, they are licensed lawyers who simply go apply for the job and are hired.
So there can be several assistant district attorneys.
Oh yes. I don't know how many, but I would imagine that in Salt Lake County, Davis County, Utah County, that there are many.
Many.
Yeah.
Well, unless you look at the thing, then Sim Gill pretty much tries every case, right?
Yeah. But he is Mr. Simgill. He is an elected official.
Yes. Okay. And then how often are they elected?
I believe it's every 4 years. I believe it's 4 years for the district attorney, but I'm not certain of that. I haven't researched it recently. Yeah.
Okay.
That's.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Yeah.
Trying to think on a separate side note, Alec, if you've got anything relevant questions to the times today, legal questions, throw those in here. And Mr. Rob, you're up for your big three.
So the question, Steve, that I like to ask people on the podcast is, if you were able to go back in time, and there's that young farrier paying his way through law school, what words of advice would you give to him now as the experienced, seasoned man you are?
Wow. I suppose, regardless of, the occupation, profession that I chose, I think that, that's a good question for anyone to consider. As I interpret that as being your question is, in other words, what important things has life taught you? Especially, as it pertains to, your course of action, what decisions that you'll make, especially as a young person. One of the, great ironies of life, in my view, is the decisions that you make that affect your life in the most profound ways. You're making the time of your life when you are the least experienced.
Absolutely.
But having said that, it may seem trite, but I would say, without question, believe in yourself, be in touch with yourself, listen to your intuition.
Trust it.
Trust it. Trust your intuition. Find good mentors. Okay, find somebody who seems like that they are where you would like to be. Make a friendship with them. Bring value to that relationship, so that they have a reason and incentive to be in that role for you, and find a good mentor for what you're doing.
And then ride motorcycles with them.
Thanks. That's
And
very kind.
I think that would be true. For it's not applicable to becoming a lawyer more than like anything else. Whatever it is you want to be, whatever it is you want to do, I think that's a key. I think that the way to gain mastery over any skill is to become a part of a community where people have that. There's so much learning. I see a lot of things on social media about people with high levels of education, thinking that they understand so much more than they do, and there's a lot of people who have great understanding who don't necessarily have academic degrees. And I realize that they're thinking about people like me because I have several academic degrees. But I'll just say, I acknowledge that so much learning does not happen in school. Okay, so much learning happens in other activities and other aspects of life, but that's precisely the reason I say it is like you see someone who is doing what you would like to do, who is doing it well, who is succeeding at it, form a friendship. Okay, form a friendship that is so much more valuable than just reading books on the subject. I would say do that too. read everything you can, but find a mentor. And I'm going to wake up tomorrow and think about this question and think, I should have said this, I should have said that. But I suppose the other advice that I would give to my younger self would simply be patient. As life develops, as the plot of your life begins to unfold, if it seems like things are not going your way, if it seems like things are not turning out well, continue to make good decisions and wait. Okay, and wait. And I know that there's probably some like really clever cliche or like proverb about comparing yourself to others, and I can't think of one right now. It'd be better if I could. But I think that many young people, and I would include myself in this, that they become preoccupied with what everybody who doesn't live under a rock recognizes as being the unfairness of life. Some people seem to be having great outcomes, despite possibly making poor decisions or possibly seeming to lack merit in many respects.
Some guys have all the luck, huh?
That sort of thing, yeah. Like this, some guys have all the luck phenomenon sort of thing. The advice I would give to my younger self and to any young person is that don't focus on that. Don't focus on the comparisons. Don't be envious or angry if things don't seem to go your way as much as it is for other people, because you don't really know how it is for them. Okay, and what you really have got to do is you got to focus on yourself. But yes, find mentors, seek advice, seek good advice from people who seem like that they possess judgment that you can trust. And just focus on yourself, make good decisions. Don't worry about what's happening with everybody else so much.
Great advice. That is great advice. So many times I think that we spend so much time, that's one of the 3 thieves of happiness is comparison. Criticism and judgment are the other 2. And I think that one, if you're carrying that in your back pocket, comparing yourself to where I should be, these unrealistic expectations, you can rob your now. You can take away the opportunity to be happy now. And I look back on my life and I think of all of the great times that I've had that I didn't enjoy because I was busy comparing myself to what I should have, where I should be, I was shooting all over myself. And so I think that's some great advice. The other question is, if you were to look into the future now and you see, and this is a kind of an ambiguous question, but you can see what's happening in the world. You are an industry expert. You've been a witness front row of your industry for over 20 years. And regardless of what anyone says, that puts you in expert level of understanding the history or the progression of the business. And my question would be where do you see this criminal defense, this business going in the next 3 years? We're in a volatile time.
Boy, yeah, I think I know what you mean.
It's the pendulum has swung. We have the pendulum has swung quite, in the defense world. In my opinion, it's swung back into the.
I realize that there are lawyer jokes for a reason. Okay.
Here we go.
One of my least favorite things about being a lawyer, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. Hopefully other lawyers are not listening to the podcast, or maybe we want them to listen too, sure. But one of my least favorite things about being a lawyer is having to deal not with other lawyers generally, because there are a lot of people that are just like great people and scholars, and they're a pleasure, but having high conflict experiences they're unnecessary with other lawyers. That's one of my least favorite things about being in the profession. But where I'm trying to go with that is that despite all the negative buzz about lawyers generally, I think that a free society, that one of the guarantees of maintaining a free society is to have lawyers who are very good lawyers. Okay, I think that is at least one of like the front line.
The front line. Yeah, well said.
Of a defense, of like forming a defense about changes in government that would lead to tyranny. Because among other things, okay, lawyers who are truly scholars, okay, of their profession, they understand the history, they understand the issues on a level that only lawyers do. Just one thing that comes to mind. Another thing that comes to mind, I think that in society we are experiencing a decline of civility generally.
Agreed.
People, this idea that, one thing that we should primarily teach children is to have good manners, to socialize them in a way where they learn to be respectful, especially to adults and teachers of their children. I think that's starting to take a back seat, and I think incivility is also a threat to the legal profession. And I think that licensing agencies, the state bars, the various state, that they're aware of this, and they're trying to find ways to offer training that will encourage civility and to promote civility, and also to police incivility. But I think that's a concern. I said it before. I played the role of a judge in a high school moot court contest, and this experience sticks in my head. One of the things that I complimented the contestants on was the fact that they came to court for their mock trial dressed appropriately, groomed appropriately. And my comment to them is that by doing that, you showed respect to not only the judiciary, the judges that you're arguing before, but to the judicial process in doing that. But the reason that is important is without respect, I feel that there cannot be order. Without order, I don't feel that there can really be justice. So in other words, I think that respect, civility is necessary in order to have a judicial process to administer justice. And
it's very subtle.
Yeah, and when I see, for example, the level of incivility, the United States Congress, perhaps some of it's warranted, but as a general proposition, it concerns me because what I believe is that when we come to the point where words are useless,
then what?
Then violent conflict is imminent.
And here we are. That is a great answer. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I fully believe that you are 100% right. And we are running out of words because we have lost the humanization of one another. We don't look to one another as valuable other humans. We look at you as your opinion is wrong, which makes you lesser. And I really am grateful for that. That means a lot. In wrapping this up, the thing that I would like to share is that if you're looking for some honest, straight advice, legal advice, and you are looking for someone that has your best interest in mind, regardless of the outcome, your opinion even, or your ego, it's good to have someone like Steve in your back pocket, someone that's going to represent you well. And so I really am grateful for your time here and sharing your professionalism and some of your ideas. Thank you for your time tonight.
Well, high praise indeed, and thank you for being here. I enjoyed it. It was a great talk.
If you have enjoyed this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, please share it with your friends and family. Tell your neighbors and everyone at church that this is the one you want to listen to, especially if you have a motorcycle club. Tell them all about it. We have really enjoyed having some special guests on here, offering those golden nuggets, that advice that we can take into our lives. And it's important that you share this message. Get on, like our podcast, and leave a comment. Help us get to the top, because that's what our goal is to share some really quality messages in the world that needs it. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.